my son, when I start talking like this, he says, like what I'm going to talk, right? Remembering things. He says, Dad, how was it way back when the Earth's crust was cooling? But you see, you know, Jackie Robinson broke into the big leagues, not because he was black, but because he could play ball. All right? All right? You know, and one of the good things about what is happening out here in this world today is that we can tell our children, learn how to play ball because they need you. It's not going to be a matter of whether we like a particular group anymore. It is a matter of can the individuals within that group produce. Right? But in order to be fair about that, we have to be certain that each person within the culture has had a chance to be trained to produce. And the possibilities of business and the political environment working together to create whole new training programs that bring us people that we know can do the job. And when we begin to see what is happening in our streets, we have to realize that it is no longer what you look like that tells us whether you can produce. And I'm not talking about color now. I'm talking about what people wear, how they come to the job, right? In the employment office, because a person comes in looking a little raggedy, doesn't mean that they're not capable. It means they haven't had a chance to produce so they can wear something. I probably told this story to a number of you before because you've been in workshops. But it is the one particular thing that hangs in my mind when I think of the guys in the streets, is that I work with the Black Pea Stone Nation, and the Lead 20 each controlled 1,000 young men. And they didn't have salaries to do it with. Right? They didn't have all the kinds of tools that you have as managers to deal with, right? They had the natural ability to keep 1,000 young men in line of peace and to join together in such ways that the Black Pea Stone Nation controlled the entire south side of Chicago on anything they wanted to move on. Now, when I think of those 20, all my life, ever since then, I've thought of what business has lost. Any one of us in this room wish we could control 1,000 people, right? We wouldn't be a manager, we'd be a vice president. Exactly right. So what I was looking at every time I met with those guys was 20 vice presidents who not only could have also been presidents of their own companies given a chance, right? It is who we give chances to, and we can't take it for granted that because a person doesn't have the right curriculum in front of them, right, that we can judge it. We've got to learn to judge deeper during this period because we've had 15 years of people being left out. And we can't afford to use the genius and the ability of those who now in a new environment want to come in. How do we decide that? That's not going to be an easy issue to decide, but it's going to be in many ways highly personable. But it's to be argued out among those who really make the decisions at the top for the rest of us, because it has to be done in a kind of a unity. And it is not a matter of being nice. It is a matter of America saving itself. Now, we can succeed in this decade if we choose. If we choose to see what is really happening and what is really there. Right? Let me give it to you now. 2 or 3 stories. Love stories. Right? Well, so people, you know, so we get together, right? But I want to tell you one of the great stories that's happened in business in the last few years that portends the possibilities for all of us. And many of you know about this story, but I have a few last ideas on it. Is that a businessman in New York, Wall Street, very rich, was invited to come back to the grade school from which he graduated to give a little graduation speech as they moved on into high school. So he did, and he looked at this crowd, and it's a whole different crowd than when he went to this school. Hear me? All right? All right? And thank you, sister. Sister said, we got it, right? All right. And he looks at them, and because he's a practical thinking person, he doesn't try to give them the same little speech he'd made up in his office on Wall Street, thinking of the people that used to be there 30 years ago. All right? So he has to remake it immediately to make good sense and not to seem stupid. Do you get me? So as a result, he says to that group of now black and Puerto Rican kids that if you graduate from high school with a B average, I will guarantee you college. You know what happened? 80% of them made it. Approximately 80%. Made it. But the other thing that happened that's so important is that the parents got interested. Because now everything they'd lived for and worked for could be fulfilled. That they had been in the streets of Harlem and Spanish Harlem, working on little jobs, giving up their lives, with only one thing hoped for, is that their children may have something better than they did, and they didn't see where it was coming from. And then when there was a new policy, when there was a new programming, and they saw the possibilities, they became new people too. And the teachers, trained to do a job, but having to come back every day to this deadening atmosphere, knowing that there was little hope, knowing that there was little future, had become just ordinary workers, not really professional. And now when they knew that the kids they were going to teach could go on and fulfill their lives, they became better professionals, better managers of the potential that was there. And the kids changed, the parents changed, the school changed. And because a man came and sold hope. And as managers, that becomes a tremendously important thing for us. Especially in a day where we can be believable, right? Is how much hope can we really give to people on the jobs where they are today? That's a little different than knowing something about electronics. But this is really the electronic surge that goes through the human being that is far more important than the electronic equipment that they're working on. It's because ultimately that's what makes us a real workforce, is the workers themselves decide. Now, let's look at this again. If we can see its national value, then all of us as companies and as a nation working together can make the difference. If we can see the national value, we will really do it. For instance, is it the Lincoln that he mentioned coming to lead the nation? Saw something I think was quite different, is that people have been arguing about slavery. He understood that commerce was being stopped because of slavery. You see what I'm saying? Is that the nation could never fulfill the potential of its workforce, and that we had South and North working against each other. That it wasn't just a matter of slavery, it was a matter of commerce. It was a matter that white people in the South were kept at a low level because the workforce was kept at a low level. And that Northerners couldn't compete with cheap labor. It was a larger issue. It was a national issue in terms of the future of a nation. Is that, let's look at it again, in Second World War, is Truman passed legislation that made it very clear that we had to use black workers in our defense plants as well as everybody else. He didn't go to Congress for it, he wrote it out. It was a presidential edict. He wasn't going to take a chance on the fussing and fighting between sectionalism and the southern racist politicians over and against and all of that. He wrote it down, said this is going to be. What? Because it is a national priority, because there's an emergency in the land and we were living in a critical time. As a result of that, I'm looking at you because I'm thinking about your father got to work. As a result of your father working, hey, you got the education you got with him, right? Is that how far down the road do we see? Where is the policies that make the difference? How does business and government work together to make those changes at one level, but then allow us to manage at the other level so that we produce the products that allow us to win the war? That's what Truman was thinking about, how to win the war. All right? And we won that war. Now we've got a great economic war to win in our world. Right? What we're deciding in this decade is who's going to be the leader of the world. And the leader of the world is going to be those that produce the best. And those that produce are going to be those that use the genius of their workforce. Now when I say genius, I'm not talking about a few people up here. All right? For the particular things, we're all genius at what we do when we're really released to do it well. All right? Is it, I like to watch sports, right? I can't do them anymore. You hear the ego involved anymore? I never could, right? What is this? I love to watch them, and I have learned that those guys are genius. They're physical genius. That genius comes in many forms. Can we tap the genius in the individual people we work with in our workforce? Can we see in them the hidden qualities of their being so that in fact we can give them hope that to become somebody where they are, and realizing where we are that there's a larger picture to be fulfilled, and that we're working on winning a major war in the world where it no longer is a matter of who develops the best gun, but who develops the best products. Is that, here we are, is that, well, now what? I suppose. And this is a decade of deterioration or development. And the moral leadership of the world is at risk, and the production, the possibilities of producing, the matter of the development of wealth makes all the difference in the world. See, what happens inside the plant is decided by the people that work in that plant. And what happens between the people in the plant is what will decide our future. And to realize that who you are makes all the difference in the world, it seems to me. Because as a manager, you stand in between the great ideas of a culture's possibilities and the people that have to produce them. And this up here can't happen if you don't do your job here, because the relationship to the people will not be real. And life is in relationships. If you don't remember another thing I say, remember those three little words. I can't even count those 4 little words, all right? Life is in relationships. And I don't care where we are, whether we're dealing with our social lives, whether we're dealing with our family, or whether we're dealing in the workforce. Life is in relationships. And we've got a diverse workforce now, and as managers, you have to make certain that we are able to work together. And when we look at it, let me show you another kind of thing that comes. In one company that I work for, and going all over, I don't want you to think that we're talking only about Northern Telecom. Is that we're talking about the necessity of American business to move. And that everywhere along the line, no matter where I go, south or north, east or west, no matter what kind of business it is, there's this new awareness of how to tap the best. And one company I work for, it represents manufacturing. They're in competition with the Japanese. And the president told the employees in a meeting much like this: your pension may well depend upon how serious you take this 2-day workshop on racism. Yeah, that's when it gets tough. That's right. And then he went on to tell them, because whether the company is here or not will depend upon it. You see. So that as we begin to look at what we're talking about a much larger picture than it seems. In fact, American business has finally learned, because of competition in the rest of the world, has finally learned that survival is not compulsory. You hear that? See, we have taken it for granted in American life that big business would survive, period. Now we begin to learn that survival is not compulsory. Another high-tech company has done something like you're doing, so I know the great possibilities of it. Because they're working like you're working, I think you're head of the team, with team-directed workforce. You put that together with anti-sexism, put that together with anti-racism, and the production went out of the ceiling. It is not enough for one of these. No new management method will work today unless the managers within it are also geared to deal with what this culture has given us and what we've grown up with. What we've grown up with, black people mistrusting white people or white people disliking black people, is not good enough for the new period. Right? Is that there has to be, and remember, and just because I keep using black and white, I'm talking about racism and sexism. I don't care who the racism gets, right? Remember, by the end of this decade, there'll be more Hispanics in America, Latinos, right? Various kinds, in America than black people, right? And we're talking about the workforce. We're not talking about black and white people, really, right? Right? And we're talking about women, not black women and white women. We're talking about women, right? Sexism is sexism. Black men are just as sexist as white men when it comes to sexism, right? It's just that black women have learned to tell us where to go to. differences in the political climate. And because we're in competition with the world, because it's deterioration or democracy, because quality is the most important thing that the workforce must produce anywhere in the world, because the best of the workforce must be brought to bear and brought out and used in our world, because we wasted too many human resources and too many people's lives for too long, and we can't afford to do it. This is a decade for American business to choose to implement a proper social vision. Not simply a business strategy, but a social vision. And to center that vision into the workings of its corporate culture, so that this nation may fulfill its potential. For we're not simply a democratic culture or a capitalistic culture. We are a capitalist democratic culture. And what happens in both of these areas determines our future. Where we will end in the world,